All right, you're welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Morning Line with Nancy, and we are in our interview segment. Our guest is in the studio, Michael Oluwagbemi. He's the co-founder of Wennovation Hub and board chairman of AfriLabs. Michael, good morning.
Thanks for having me.
All right, like we said earlier, we will be looking at the state of the economy. A lot of issues to look at. The MPC's the Monetary Policy Committee meeting is currently ongoing, and generally we look at the issues of inflation and a couple of others. All right, quickly, let's find out from you. Can you give us an assessment, of the Nigerian economy as it is now? How would you assess generally the Nigerian economy?
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thanks for having me. I think there's no doubt in my mind that the average man on the street feels the pain of the Nigerian economy. We've had a number of missed opportunities to turn things around. I think the economy has been bleeding from first, naturally, high inflation. The economy has also suffered a lot of policy inconsistencies. And the basic underpinnings of an economy, strong infrastructure, consistent government policy, and job creation, all the indices that we should be looking at for any economy of our type has basically gone in the negative territory in the past, not just 3 years, I like to say in the past 10 years. So this country and this economy, the common man on the street have been feeling the pain on the chin. Even during the period where some people will be talking about the high growth rate in the GDP and economic growth and those kind of things, most people on the streets they feel it. So the economy of Nigeria is sort of already, I would say, in the intensive care unit. What we need to do now is to carry out a quick bypass surgery in order to bring it out of there and get it back working.
Okay, we seem to have seen the central bank inject some funds in the last few weeks, and this has greatly helped the Naira. We've also seen that the inflation rate dropped for the first time in 15 months to about 17.72%. Now, for you, what are some of those things that will still, those actions, because you said that the issue of policy is one that has, put us in the state where we are now. What are some of those things, those steps that you think that we need to take now, maybe following what the CBN is doing that is currently helping both the currency and generally the economy?
Yes, I think in terms of solutions, there's no doubt in my mind that you need to take steps that, one, reduce inflation or manages inflation, two, that creates jobs, and three, that increases productivity. These three things have to be done almost in near perfection. This economy, we do not have an opportunity to make mistakes, neither do we have an opportunity to delay. The problem of delay and timing and inconsistency has been the biggest issue that the economy has faced today. Because when investors would rather know that you have a bad policy and plan for your bad policy than not know your policy at all. That way people are more reticent and they will not put money into the economy, and therefore you will not create jobs. So key things. First thing, if you want to manage this economy today, first thing first, is to make sure you are clear, crystal clear, about your policy and restore confidence in your policy. In the case of policies now, we're talking about monetary and fiscal policy. Fiscal policy-wise, we need to have a very clear path from where we are today in terms of spending and where we need to be at the end of the year in terms of spending. Now we're talking about the budget. And there needs to be an alignment of that alongside in terms of what was the program of the government when it sought our votes. So the manifesto have to be brought back on the table, and we need to look at it and say, what is in that manifesto that the government promised one, and two, how are they putting money behind all those promises? And how quickly can we inject money into this economy in order to get the economy going again? That's on the fiscal side. On the monetary side, I'm sorry, it seems as if the damage is already done. The market simply does not trust the CBN governor, I'm sorry to say. The market does not believe what comes out of the CBN today. In fact, you talked about what the CBN is doing right now. It was forced. On a Thursday, the National Economic Council met, the governors, and basically said it is not tenable that our constituents will want to go abroad, or our constituents will want to send their children to school because we've not provided schools here in Nigeria. Our constituents want to treat their children or their families and elderly overseas and not be able to access foreign exchange. And therefore, they said, and they forced the central bank to liberalize the policy. That should have been done. You do not need the NEC to do that. So we have a terrible crisis of confidence. And if you know the way currencies work, any paper currency, we no longer have the gold standard. So any paper currency fluctuates up and down based on psychology. So the psychology, the confidence that the policymakers themselves give the system is more important when it comes to monetary policy. So unfortunately, I think the die is already cast when it comes to monetary policy. What we now need to do is to see how we can use foreign fiscal policy to help monetary policy, whether forced or unforced, to get along. But then we have to send a signal. I don't know how that signal will be sent. We need to send a signal that those people who are currently, who mismanaged the monetary policy, that they are no longer in charge of the economy. So these are the kind of things that needs to be done as far as policy on the fiscal and monetary side is concerned. Now, when we go to the second one, I talked about job creation. I've always believed that the greatest poverty alleviation program any government can implement is that of creating jobs. And government don't create jobs. Government creates environment to create jobs. So we need to quickly look at our economy and find out the areas where jobs can be created the fastest. Somehow we've chosen the hardest of the 5 sectors where the possibilities are, if you ask me. We've chosen agriculture, but that's the hardest. Because when you want to invest in agriculture, it takes time for it to wear its way into the system. Nigeria already creates 70% of our employed are already in agriculture. So there's really no new low-hanging opportunity, I would like to say, when you look at the degrees of impact in agriculture. I think there are other sectors that should have been looked at and should have actually taken priority. For example, the service sector, especially aviation. Aviation is one of the biggest job creators in the world, period. Travel is one of the biggest job creation in the world, period. Nigeria has an inherent advantage. We are a country that is sitting on the equator, and we are also a country that is about just 1 hour offset of the GMT. What that means is that Nigeria is as equidistant to everywhere in the world. Those 2 characteristics. That means Nigeria should be the hub of travel in the world. Why are we not investing in aviation? Why do we have one of the worst airports, 2 of the worst airports in the world? Why don't we have, why have we not supported the private sector to invest in airlines that will use this country as a hub? Why are we taxing the airlines out of existence? Why is FAN that makes about 100 billion naira in cash every year cannot even maintain a toilet, and people dig through your luggage with their hands? So these things do not promote tourism. And Nigeria also has another advantage. You go to the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, for example. It's full of churches, it's full of religious grounds, including Guru Maharaji and Muslims as well. So we have an advantage in religious tourism. So why don't we have a religious visa program? TB Joshua alone brings in about 100,000 people to this country every 2 or 3 times in a year. So we should promote the advantages we have as a country and stop depending on things that sound nice. Yes, agriculture sounds nice, but then when you do the calculation, agriculture is mostly mechanized these days. Wow. So if I'm going to create a job in that sector, it takes me a while for it to work down the system. But I can create 500,000 jobs in aviation within 2 to 3 months. Okay.
On the 7th of March this month, the federal government released the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, which is a blueprint that is supposed to help the country come out of the current recession it is facing. And the plan encompasses so many plans in which we can help bring the country out, the economy out of the woods. Now, although analysts have come out to say that the key thing is in the implementation of these plans. And like you said, you talked about consistency. I think this is one of the greatest bane we suffer in Nigeria in terms of politics. There is no consistency. So what's your take on the ERGP? Is it the silver lining for us in the dark cloud?
Well, it's never too late. That's always that's the first thought. That policy document should have been out within the first 1 week of the administration. I was privy to many plans, and I happen to have been friends with those people who prepared many of those plans quite early in the administration. Unfortunately, we're just seeing those plans almost 2 years later, when we are just 1 year away from kicking off the election. That's quite unfortunate. This administration inherited an economy that was bleeding, no doubt. This administration inherited an economy that was bleeding on all sides, both in terms of oil prices and in terms of the massive corruption of the last administration, including corruption during the election itself. So that is known, but then that's not an excuse. That means you just have to move faster. It means the patient was already going into intensive care unit. You don't have time to then now be doing a lot of sessions, study sessions. No, what you need to do is bypass surgery. You go straight for the heart. and you cut the artery and you do what you need to do because the patient is going to die. So in this instance, we did not do what was needed quite early. That's one. Secondly, I agree in some ways and in some fashion with Professor Soludo when he said that the document itself, we need to ask who owns it. Because I see a lot of misalignment in the document as it were. I think there could have been better job about ownership. Who owns that document and who is implementing what within that document? That's one valid area of criticism. Because a document that is not owned, a document that the highest level of the government does not buy into, a document that seems to have been prepared by consultants will remain on the consultant's shelf. And thirdly is that document itself needs to align, again I go back to the promises of the president and his vice president when they ran for office. What happened to the issue of devolution of powers? Why is power still centralized 2.5 years later? I drove through Abuja yesterday night. It was completely dark. Power is not coming to our homes. That means that we are losing productivity, which was the third issue I was going to go to. If you spend 2-3 hours trying to put on your generator, that means you're not spending those 2 to 3 hours to think about insanely great solutions for the future that is going to increase productivity in the economy. So why is power still being centralized? When the APC promised in their manifesto, which I was privy to, again, I was part of those people who helped to advise that manifesto, that this power needs to be decentralized. Why are we still sitting here and police is still centralized? We cannot promise something 2 years ago and then hope that someday it's going to get done. No, you move fast and go to the other problem. The issue of the EGRP actually overall is because we've not tackled what I call the 3 fundamentals. There are 3 fundamentals in an economy which has not been tackled. First thing first is the capacity to deliver. Today, the Nigerian public service, the Nigerian civil service, is basically inept. In fact, I don't call them civil service, I call them evil service. You go there, you bring any proposal, just try it. Anybody can try it. You can go off the street and go to the civil service of Nigeria. They will kill it. That's why NMPC itself resisted reforms.
So do you think we don't have the right people in right places?
We don't. We need to, look, we need to go back to make government fit for purpose. Government itself has to have the ability to deliver on its own promise. And the heart of the government is the civil service. So you need to reform the civil service. Today we have about 500 or odd agencies. We don't need that many agencies. We have about 26 ministries. Thanks to the president that cut it down. The United States became a world power by having only 4 departments. Why do we need 26? So we need to make the government, we need to size the government and focus the government and put the right people in government so that they can deliver the program in this EGRP. Otherwise, the EGRP is just another nice document that's never going to be able to achieve what it's meant to achieve. Secondly, the second fundamental, you cannot claim to jumpstart an economy if you do not have data. I give a shout out here to Dr. Kale, who has done a great job within the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics. However, his work is just one part of the work. The other part of the work when it comes to data is the issue of identity management. Do you know Nigerians? How do you know the Nigerian? We don't have, we say we love Nigerians. How can you like something you don't know? So we need to take seriously the issue of going back and knowing every Nigerian. Once you know every Nigerian, it impacts the issue of taxes, because now suddenly you can know everybody and tax them. And so therefore you stop squeezing the middle class today in Nigeria, which is continually being squeezed by more taxes, while the upper class doesn't pay anything and the lower class get away with just abusing government. So everybody needs to pay their fair share. The issue of identity management is also going to impact the issue of fraud in the system, and therefore it's going to restore confidence in your financial markets. The issue of identity management is also going to attract credit from the outside into your system, because credit and FDI is going to be a major way to reduce the impact of currencies. So this issue of identity management is critical, and the government has not taken it serious enough. These were things that could have been done within the first 5 to 6 months of the administration by merging all the varying databases, BVN, the information with your telcos, everything. We can get between 120 million and 130 million Nigerians by just merging all this database from day one. That means we only have about 70 million gap, which we mostly children in primary schools and secondary schools. We cover that very quickly. And then suddenly we have data. Thirdly is the issue of judicial and police reforms, security reforms. You cannot, while the government has done a lot of work in terms of terrorism, and kudos to them, I think the same urgency that was brought to the issue of terrorism, if it had been brought to the issue of the economy, we would have been in a very different place today. But terrorism is just one side of our security problems again. So the issue of judicial and security reforms is very fundamental to an economy. I would not invest in an economy where I don't feel safe. I will not invest in an economy where I don't feel that if I go to court, I will get justice quickly and rapidly. So in the case of, let's take the case of Lagos State, again, because the way federalism is designed, states are supposed to be the experiments where you can actually experiment before you take things to the national state. I think we can look to Lagos for what needs to be done. What did Lagos do? What did Professor Shibaji, when he was the Minister of Justice leading Lagos? One, they cleaned up the judiciary. This should have started from day one.
What has been done currently?
It's rather too late. And the approach and the strategy is just not right. The approach is a fire brigade approach. Again, when you do things late, then what you start doing is that you start shooting the house down. No. And then you now get feedback. You now get blowback. And then the reform itself will stop in its track. What you need to do is to make sure that you have a strategy for judicial and security reforms that make sense. Clean up the judiciary. Make sure the police today, what's the police of Nigeria? What do? I ask people all the time. FRSC does your vehicles, VIS does your traffic, VIO does your vehicles, EFCC does your corruption, NCNDC protects your pipeline, the Nigerian Army does your terrorism, DSS does your security issues. Then what's left for the police? Shine shoes?
Well, without standing for the police, I'm sure they're also still trying.
I think the police force, they're actually trying their best.
Yeah, they could be better structured. That's the thing. We promised something. Guys, go back to the manifesto. We promised something. We promised to devolve the police. And it needs to be devolved. You cannot, for the life of me, send a man that grew up in the desert, into the creek of the Niger Delta to police that place. It can't work. It's basic common sense. I grew up in Warri. If you go to Baramatu Kingdom and you go into Kwesu, and then you bring a guy that grew up in Sokoto who is even afraid of water, and those young boys decide to commit crime and they jump inside the water, he can't do anything about it. You need to localize the police all over the world. You cannot continue to operate a police structure which is based in Abuja. I will not feel safe. The reason why Lagos is safe today was because Lagos took police issues local and serious. Lagos invested in Nigerian police, even to the detriment of Lagos' own budget, brought together all the corporates. And suddenly what happened? The Lagos economy boomed. Today, Lagos has more IGR than all the other states combined. Today, Lagos State is actually not in recession. They got more money, surplus, in the March of last year at the height of the recession than any time in the history of Lagos. Because Lagos had been doing this thing for the past 16 years. Those are the fundamentals.
Well, I believe we just need more synergy. Like you said, Lagos State government, corporate organizations, probably looking at how ministries and agencies can also synergize to try and see how they can help the economy. Now, looking at the fiscal, monetary policies, because we're looking at monetary policy, there was a meeting recently as part of the MPC, which had the Minister of Finance, Trade, CBN governor, a couple of others, looking at issues around the economy. We've not had this in the past. Now looking at the monetary policy, because you mentioned the fact that we've had issues there. What are we looking at? Because the monetary policy committee, is meeting. What are some of the things that you expect, from that?
I expect to be more alignment, because we understood like yesterday the Minister of Finance met with the CBN governor, that there should be more alignment with the goals of the administration.
Okay.
I also expect that you will not see any dramatic change in policy, given that inflation rate is now coming down and the MPC seems to be always so focused on inflation, even though I would like to argue that we might need to go back into the CBN Act, just like the Federal Reserve Act in the US and in various other countries, to actually make job creation and employment targets their #1 goal, not inflation.
Okay.
But today they are almost 90–100% focused on working on inflation. And so I expect that because the year-on-year inflation rate has reduced, of course we can discuss why that is so, and because the inflation rate itself month-on-month also have gone down, that the MPC will more than likely just hold the rate and watch the impact on the economy. I do not expect a dramatic reversal. What I expect going forward is more alignment, because I think the action that was taken by the NEC, you are still seeing the effect on the MPC, because basically the NEC said this is not working and more or less forced the hand of the central bank to do what is right by the Nigerian people. So these are the overall my expectation from the MPC meeting. Or what I do expect going forward in terms of our monetary policy is that we should stop the schizophrenic approach to policy making. You decide one day to do something, the next day you reverse it. If it's bad, it's bad. Then just stick with it. Don't stop all these rigmarole. But it will have been better if you consulted widely and stopped making the bad decision. And I hope, again, I think that we are suffering from a malady in Nigeria and when it comes to monetary policy, just generally, that we always want to put in commercial bankers in that position, the central bank. Central bank governor is not a commercial banker position. It's a position of an economist. And history proves me right that people who actually knows the economy, who live the economy. In fact, you're better off putting a businessman, to be honest, that actually did business. Because bankers in Nigeria, I have my doubts when it comes to them being business people.
I think the central bank governors.
But let's look at price stability now. Because even looking at the fact that the headline inflation came down, the food index did not come down. The prices, we went into the marketplace and we did a report on it, and prices are still going up by the day. And I believe that will be one of the focus at the ongoing MPC meeting. How can we get past the stage? Because at a point some time ago, the federal government set up a food task force to look into the prices of the reasons why prices are skyrocketing. But how do we bring this down? What are your suggestions on ways that can help us go back to what we used to have, that if that is achievable?
There are no quick solutions. There are no quick fixes when it comes to food inflation in Nigeria, because it's been, again, inflation can be due to a couple of things, right? It can be a demand push or a supply pull. In our own instance, we have a supply pull. First thing first is that this inflation is driven by high cost of importation, then you have high taxes, and then you have low productivity. If you take those three factors, the high cost of importation is directly due to the currency problems I've told you about, which is in the hand of the central bank governor and his team to make sure that, because today I think there's about a 20 to 30% premium for policy inconsistency in the exchange rate of the naira. And you saw that happen very quickly once they just implemented the policy. It fell from 500 to 430. So yes. That's when it was 50, 60% premium.
Well, in CBN's defense, they are actually trying.
Yeah, they did it again.
And we are seeing changes.
We are seeing changes. But the point is, even that policy inconsistency itself is still priced in. Nigeria's foreign exchange earnings has only fallen about 40%, but the naira has devalued more than 70, 80%. That tells me there's a gap. What's the reason for that gap? It's a psychological premium that's been put in there because of the inconsistency. So, however, once you were inconsistent, the only solution is to be consistent going forward. Maybe you will restore trust. There's really nothing you can do. It's all psychology. And then the second issue of productivity, Nigeria has the second highest proportion of our land, arable land in the world, at 38%. But you can travel from one point in Nigeria to another point to understand that our land are highly unproductive.
Docile.
So it's critical that we get back to our roots. But getting back to our roots, we have to also understand that agriculture has moved. My grandfather's agriculture is no longer the agriculture of the world. It cannot feed the world anymore. So we need to move and ensure that we are encouraging the right type of agriculture, which is mass-scale commercial agriculture, not subsistent, small-scale agriculture, which, when you look at the entire policy frame of all the multifarious organizations that have been set up for agriculture, BOA, BOI, and you look at everything they are promoting, they are more or less promoting subsistent agriculture. So we need to do something about productivity, which is very critical in the agriculture space. All
right, global environment definitely has an impact on our own decisions. Looking at what the US did recently in terms of raising, its own interest rate, how would that affect Nigeria? Probably looking at what we may be looking at in Nigeria through the MPC today.
Yeah, I think in terms of the implication of the Fed Reserve raising rate, what that normally does is that it discourages FDI to foreign countries, because now you can get a better rate of return in the United States with zero, more or less zero risk compared to Nigeria. Buy treasury and relax. A friend always told me, a foreign investor friend always told me that $1 in New York is equal to $1 in Lagos. So why will I expose my dollar to more risk? Moving it from New York to Lagos. So that's the impact of that. But that said, I think that actually the global trend favors Nigeria. I think because of the already we can now see high level of political risk in other countries, United States, Europe, Greece, and all these zones, Brexit, all of these are now showing that because of the risk in these other areas, people are now saying, well, New York is not as safe as it used to be, just because of the presidency of Donald Trump. So that favors Nigeria. And of course, because of the bellicose nature of the administration, means that they most likely are going to start some kind of war in the Middle East. That favors oil and gas, and which is good for Nigeria.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Michael Oluwagbemi. He is the board chairman, AfriLabs, and also the co-founder, Wennovation Hub. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. I really appreciate it. That's the much we can take on the program today. We've heard from our guests, you've heard from the discussions we have had today. So all focus is on the CBN governor and his team, and we'll get to know that in a matter of hours, I think, today. Let's hope for the best. Let's hope things will actually get better in the country, because in the end, we have to be optimistic. There's no room for pessimism. We have to be optimistic and hope things will get better. Thank you for staying with us today. Thank you for making a date and investing your time with us today on the program. I am yours truly, Amodu Christiana.
All right, my name is Ehizo J. Momo. Let's do this again tomorrow. Thank you.